Most people sell or wreck their first cars and often they live to regret it. Me? I've held on to my first car for over 16 years now. And I may well live to regret that. Join us today as we roll this thing out from where it had been resting for many years, completely neglected and covered in enough dust that it looked like I'd left myself my own little barn find. We'll be trying to turn back the clock by trying to get this thing running and maybe even get one final drive in before we tear it apart to be reborn better than it ever was before. Hope you enjoy. Welcome back into Browney's garage. Last episode, we took a look at the history of my first ever car, an EBII Ford Fairmont, and discussed our plans to reshell this into a cleaner EBII Fairmont gear shell, get it back on the road, and then modify it into something that we can really have some fun with. Before we get into today's video, I could use your help on something quickly. I've never been particularly big on naming cars, but I feel like this project long term is probably deserving of one, and if I'm honest, it would really help making the titles of these videos easier, and it'd be a lot quicker to refer to the project if we had a good name for it. So jump in the comments below and let me know your thoughts on a name for this car and project. Plans have a way of changing, but the basics are that we will be using the EBII Fairmont gear shell. It will, for now, be staying the same color, I'd say, and the single overhead cam 6-cylinder will stay, along with the 5-speed manual until I break it. We are doing this on an everyman budget, but these things have a way of spiraling out of control too, so you never know what's going to come up in the future as we get stuck into this. I'll be honest, I'm a man child, and I think calling it something simple like the D opens up all sorts of dumb joke possibilities while keeping it a little bit YouTube friendly. And we have to bear that in mind. I don't mind being a little bit cheeky, but this still has to be something that everyone can enjoy and that we don't get hit with the YouTube censorship stick, because that would be no fun. I'm a little bit nervous about opening this up to all of you, but I'm keen to see what you guys think, so let me know. And now on to today's video. Today, we'll be travelling back a little bit in time to when I was wrapping up our NA Barra Performance Mod series that I did on my BA XR6 Falcon. The series had been something I was really proud of and had a lot of fun with, and as mentioned in the last of those videos, we will soon be turboing that car. But I knew I wanted to share more of what we had coming up for this year in that final video and drop a few hints in for this series, but I didn't want it just to be a couple of photos. I really wanted to have this thing running at the end of that series, even if it was just really rough. At that time, this EB had been parked under my carport for about 4 years and hadn't been started in all that time. Even prior to that, it'd been in the front yard and only started and moved about there for many years prior to that as well. So I really wasn't sure what condition it would be in, whether it would start or whether it would ever drive again as it was. And that's all because, as a lot of you would have experienced or seen, cars really don't like not being driven. Things like seals can go hard and start to crack, rust can build up, electronics can fail and never want to work again, weird critters and animals can move into anywhere in the car, and of course, fluids like your oils and your fuels will start to go bad. If we're going to move this driveline to the new shell, it's best to work out if we have any issues now so that we know for future troubleshooting if there's an issue that was there before, or the much more likely it was working before but now it's not, so I must have stuffed something up when moving it over. All that said, I did have faith in the old rig, but I wanted to take some precautions to try and give it its best possible chance and to try and make sure that I don't cause any further damage when trying to start this thing. So we flash back now a little bit in time to when I was rolling this thing out by hand from its resting place, which was no trouble at all for a strong fella like me.
many minutes later.
Eventually, I managed to get it as far as under this tree. Not the ideal place to try to clean a car and terrible for lighting, but I'd struggled with it enough for now. This was only a quick bath. Unfortunately, I'd have to do it without the help of my pressure washer, which I'd broken and was waiting for parts to come in. Always something else to fix. The engine bay wasn't cleaned at this stage. I wanted to see exactly as it was under there. Next up was to roll the car in for a basic service and going over. With a whole heap of spiders now homeless and the barn find dust gone, the car must have been much lighter because I now had no trouble rolling it into the garage. I certainly didn't require the help of Mrs. Browney off camera. Time to jack up the car, but first, if I'm working on this car again, I just had to make use of the system in it to listen to some of the old CDs that I still had. Sadly though, as much as I'd like Chester to yell at us to shut up together while I work, copyright rules and YouTube would have a fit at that. So, instead, you're stuck with this. Come on, you know I wouldn't really do that to you, right? Let's try something else. The last oil and filter change I have noted down was only back in February of 2015, or over 6 years ago at this stage, which means it's well overdue. If car and oil manufacturers are to be believed, oil can break down, degrade and gather contaminants over time, even if the engine isn't being run, and this could of course cause all kinds of damage once it's run again. That could all just be a big oil conspiracy, but judging by the look of what's coming out, I'd say they've nailed that one. Really, it's just cheap insurance anyway, so why wouldn't we? Hey, look at that. I even remembered to use the new oil filters box to help keep the oil from running down my arm when undoing the old filter.
The most important thing we share is our big brain.
Pre-filling the oil filter a little is probably not necessary in newer engines, but it can't hurt either, and it's a habit I've tried to get myself into. This will only help to bring up oil pressure a touch quicker as well. Next up was to pull and check the spark plugs. I'm labelling the plug wires with masking tape before removing so they go back in the right order, especially important with this set that is far too long and giving no hints where any of these should fit. These plugs haven't seen a lot of kilometres I believe, but they have seen a lot of cold starts, idling and barely moving about the front yard of my parents for years, even before it was parked up here. All of which will see rich fuel mixtures without ever really cleaning the plugs, long term leading to the black sooty deposits on these. It's probably not best practice, but I've just cleaned these up quickly with a wire brush to give a nice clean spark. It'll get new plugs later down the line. After sitting for so long, I felt it best to also build up some oil pressure before starting it. This was part of the motivation for removing plugs, as the engine will turn over quicker and easier without them in, so they're left out for now. You would also ideally turn off the fuel pump while doing this, and I had the best intentions to do this, which is why I removed the overflow tank to get to the relay hidden underneath for this. But then I couldn't remember which relay was for the fuel pump, and they were being stubborn coming out anyway, so I left it. At least any excess fuel can be ejected out the spark plug holes for now. Failing there must have thrown me off though, cause I've completely forgot to check the airbox and air filter. Better hope nothing made its home in there for now, and I'll clean it next chance I get. I did, however, remember to charge the battery already, so we could move on to cranking the car now to get some oil pressure up. And for once, thank you to Ford for having this gauge here from the factory. More cars could use these. All good signs, the engine's turning over fine and we've built up some oil pressure. Our now clean spark plugs can go back in, and as long as nothing's gone bad from sitting, we should have spark. I'm going on blind hope that we still have compression, so we only have one more main component needed to get this thing running. This fuel again would be many years old at this point, so I mixed some fresh 98 in, hoping to balance out the old petrol. Enough babying it, time to find out if she'll start. But first we need one last precaution, and this one is as much for me as it was for the car. Considering This car had completely melted a fuse somewhere during its time sitting. A fire extinguisher seemed like a sound idea. Okay, here we go. Moment of truth. Would it start after 4 or so years since last running and sitting for many years before that? It started right up, but she's about as cranky as waking up Miss Browney on her day off. Something's off, and I've broken this car enough times to have a good idea on this particular issue. These cars run a MAP or manifold absolute pressure sensor on the firewall. If it's not getting good vacuum, the car will just dump fuel in, and it was clear to see the split on this vacuum line. This T isn't factory. I'd used it to install a secondary MAP sensor more suited for data logging and tuning. Something I never ended up doing a great deal of, but hope to do on this car in the future. Easy fix though. I cut the split section of vacuum hose off and slid it back onto the T-piece. Time for take number 2. Yeah! She's back. Calm down, buddy, but yes, she is back. A lot of top end noise, but that should clear up after some running to get the lifters to bleed up again. If you can't tell, I was just a tad bit excited to hear it start again. This car does mean quite a lot to me. Which made what followed even harder. We had what we needed from this car for the end of our Barra Performance Mod series, but I still had a lot of work to get that wrapped up. I was really keen to see if this thing would drive as it was, but I wanted to do it right, and I really wanted to share it a little with all of you who have been such a big support of the channel. And to be honest, there was still a chance it would burst into flames and kill me, and I'd hate to not have that on camera. So it was parked again for a while until I could film this, and it's finally time. We can't go very far, but let's see if we can get this thing out for one last drive as it is, and see if everything's working okay before we pull it all apart. Alright, the brakes still work. Yes, I did check over the boring safety stuff off camera too. Now we can go for a drive. So far, everything seems to be working-ish, and we haven't burst into flames, so that's a good thing. The coolant sensor, or the coolant level sensor light, is on. It keeps going on and off, but I know we've got coolant in there, so that sensor must just be playing up. That's an easy fix, and if that's the worst of what we get, that's pretty good. We do, however, of course, have to still take it pretty easy, but I'm just happy to be out driving this car again. This is really cool. It is a little old and tired, but that's to be expected. It's a small thing, but not having a big, thick pillar for boring safety reasons like you do in most newer cars really does give you a lot more visibility and really, it changes the feel of the car quite a bit. These things are by no means small or light, but compared to the BA Falcon or my VE Commodore that I drive daily, it does, you know, you can feel a difference. It does feel lighter. Unless that's all in my head, of course. It could be that as well. The cheapo eBay short shifter in this car does feel a little bit notchy, but the gearing in that 5-speed manual really helps with the feel of this car, as I just said, and it really helps with that takeoff compared to a 4-speed auto car, even with us taking it fairly easy still. I joked at the start of this video that I may live to regret keeping this car. Well, I may yet live to regret it, but right now, I definitely don't. This is amazing to be driving this thing again. It's bringing back a lot of memories, to be honest, a lot of memories, and it sounds dumb, but I even feel a little bit younger driving this thing. There is a lot of work to go on these two cars. It's all doable, of course, but it's going to push me a little bit. There's some things I haven't done before, and it is just a lot of work. In saying that, I think in the end, we're going to have something to be really happy with, and it's all going to be well worth it in the end.
This project will now go into the background as I get tools and paint supplies together, start stockpiling parts and working out a full plan for this. They say good things come to those who wait, right? Well, this car and me will have to wait a little longer, but if we tackle this with a proper plan and try not to lose momentum once we start, it has a much better chance of getting done. While the preparation happens, my main focus will now turn to the turbo conversion on my BA Falcon, so please consider subscribing to follow along with us on that, as well as getting any updates on this EB and ED project as they come out. That said, I can see myself spending some time just sitting in this seat and daydreaming anytime I lose motivation. Just hang in there a little longer for me, old mate.